The 2022 NFL Draft is barely over, yet we're already looking ahead to 2023 and trying to learn some of these draft prospects for this next year. Hopefully I can help you guys do that, and there are a lot of really good players. This is a better class than this past year. At least that's the way it looks from outside here. The quarterbacks are better. There are some really high-end prospects like you can see on the left side of your screen, and Will Anderson Jr., who I find to be the best player in the draft. We'll talk about him and a lot of others, but a couple ground rules to go over. First, one, draft order is based on Super Bowl odds. I didn't set any of them, so if you have a problem with the draft order, complain to the guys making the bets and the odds makers, not me. And it's more of, I think, it's kind of like a combination of a mock draft and also prospect rankings. There are some prospects I wanted to include in here that didn't make the cut, like Will McDonald Jr., or the fourth from Iowa State. Couldn't get him in. I wanted to move Brian Brzee up, the defensive lineman from Clemson, but ended up just slotting these guys in kind of where he could. It's so funny with these because everyone's going to come back in a year and be like, oh, this aged terribly. I'm very original with that comment. But yeah, there's so much is going to change here. A lot of this is projection, kind of anticipating that some of these players will take a step up the way we think that they will. But some of these guys, of course, will either go back to school and not be in the 2023 draft. Some of them will end up just not performing up to expectations, maybe falling way out of the first round or undrafted completely. And some of the guys that are not even included in this video, and it's a really talented class, so there could be a lot, like Phil Jerkovic, even from Boston College, could end up becoming a first-round pick. There is potential, especially with quarterbacks. So 2023 should be really interesting. And let's go ahead and get into it. Turning off the face cam so you guys can see the graphics I spent so long on. And we'll start with the Texans at number 1. This is a tough one because this obviously could be a quarterback. But with the way Davis Mills played as a rookie, I think you can anticipate him to continue to improve. And that might lead the Texans to go in a different direction than QB. But this could still be a QB. I just think Will Anderson Jr. is one of the best players I've probably ever seen at the college level, which is going to sound crazy. But he should have won the Heisman last year and was completely robbed. Didn't even get an invite to New York as a finalist. Was ridiculous. He was the best player in college football last year, in my opinion. And we'll get to the actual Heisman winner here in a second. But yeah, he's just incredibly talented. And the Texans, in my opinion, would get the best player in the draft. At number 2, we're going with the Lions and C.J. Stroud. Again, based on Super Bowl odds, that's the draft order. A quarterback out of Ohio State. He was unbelievable last year. Kind of got out to a slow start, but finished really strong. Was awesome. And he has more prototypical size. That's why he's the first quarterback off the board. Also was a little bit better statistically last season as well. So there are a few different things you can point to, but the top couple quarterbacks look pretty close. And there are a lot of quarterbacks in this mock draft as we want to try and get a lot of them out there. Number 3, you have the Jets taking Paris Johnson Jr. He's not all the way there yet, but this is projection that he's going to have a really good season. Top recruit, 5-star guy, I think like number 3 overall player in his recruiting class a couple years ago, and could end up being really solid this year as a draft-eligible player. And the Jets, with maybe a need at offensive line or offensive tackle next season, could end up going in that direction. And then number 4, you have the Atlanta Falcons taking Bryce Young, quarterback from Alabama. Won the Heisman last season. A little bit undersized, but the player's pretty good. There are some concerns that certain guys have pointed out about his style of play and how well he reads the field. But you got to keep in mind he's a one-year starter, so this could be someone that completely lights up the league or lights up college football next season, and he already won the Heisman in 2022. So he's going to be a top pick probably if I had to bet. At number 5, have the Jags going Jalen Carter. He was the best player on the Georgia defense, at least defensive line, last season. He was unbelievable, and he wasn't even draft eligible. We've heard so much about Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt on that interior of the defensive line. Well, Jalen Carter was even better than those guys last season, and you guys know how incredible those players were. If you watch any Georgia football last season, Jalen Carter is a beast. I think will be a top 10 pick. Could be even higher than this, depending on who's picking, but just kind of like the first team that made sense for me was the Jaguars. Number 6, going with quarterback Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami. He was really solid last season. The Giants obviously could be a quarterback team, and they are not expected to be all that good, although the strength of schedule is one of the worst in the league. So Giants might win a few more games than this. As a Giants fan, I'm very interested to see how this team's going to improve under new GM and head coach and Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. But Tyler Van Dyke, TBD, I think is kind of underrated right now. I think he could end up being a first-round guy, but of course we'll have to see how 2022 goes. Have the Panthers at 7 going with Will Levis out of Kentucky. Hasn't really put it all together yet, but the arm talent, the size, the athleticism is there. So there are guys that think he's going to be a top pick. I haven't really seen it yet, but again, if he has a great 2022, it makes perfect sense. Have him going number 7 to the Panthers. And then at 8, I have the Chicago Bears going Jackson Smith and Jigba. Maybe the best of the 3 Ohio State receivers we saw last season. And that includes top 10 pick Garrett Wilson. And that includes top 11 pick Chris Olave. Jackson Smith and Jigba is an incredible talent and could end up being a top 10 pick and, yeah, first receiver off the board. Certainly in play, even with some other talented receivers. It's a really good receiver class. That's just going to be something we say every single year now because the receivers get better and better and better. And there's so many talented guys. Like even Maryland has 2 really good receivers. I only have 1 making this mock draft, but shout out Raheem Jarrett. Really good player. Could end up being a first-round pick if he has a really good 2022. At number 9, have the Seattle Seahawks taking quarterback Anthony Richardson out of Florida. Looked really good in the spring game, and this is a lot of projection. Billy Napier, the new Florida head coach, is a pretty quarterback-friendly offense, I would say. And for a height, weight, speed, arm talent type freak like Anthony Richardson, yeah, he could end up being a really high pick. However, it's important to note that we have not seen it with him yet, really. Couldn't really even beat out Emory Jones for the starting quarterback position, but how much of that is then head coach Dan Mullen just going with his top recruit from that class? I don't know. You think that the head coach would want to put in the best guy that gives your team the best chance to win? The defense for Florida was not great, though, so I don't know how great Anthony Richardson really could have been to keep them in games. Would have had to be perfect, but didn't really get a ton of opportunities. But when he did, I mean, he looks pretty great at times. So, again, this is kind of a little bit more projection right now, but if he has a great 2022, I think he will be a first-round pick. He's just got that type of talent. At number 10, have the Washington Commanders going Kelee Ringo, corner out of Georgia. He's got the size, has the athleticism, will be a full-time starter in 2022 in that CB1 role, and did play quite a bit last year as well. So when you have all the intangibles like Kelee Ringo has, could end up being a top 10 pick, could even go higher than this. Cornerback is pretty valuable. Number 11, have the Steelers going inside linebacker Noah Sewell out of Oregon. Pretty great player. Yes, brother of Penei Sewell, who was a top 10 pick by the Lions pretty recently. Steelers could use, help in a lot of different spots, but I think inside linebacker could be super important with Devin Bush, future up in question in Pittsburgh with his contract coming to an end. And then number 12, have the Vikings going Myles Murphy, true edge rusher out of Clemson. We're going to have another Clemson player coming up pretty soon that I've just listed at outside linebacker because it kind of moves around a little bit. I don't know what a team's going to view him as, so I've changed a lot of these positions. So even some edge rushers are going to be listed at a slightly different position if I think they profile in a different area. But yeah, Vikings could use help on the edge. Yes, you did bring in Zadarius Smith, but you got to think this is a year in advance of this. Don't really know what's going to happen with Danielle Hunter. So Myles Murphy could certainly be a pick for the Vikings next year. Eagles have multiple first-round picks. You see 2 of them on the screen. Also, you can see a couple of transfer players. So this is a little bit of a weird thing, but Eli Ricks is certainly going to Alabama, is already there. Could end up being a top pick, was a corner from LSU. And number 15, as we skip Bijan Robinson, we'll get back to him in a second, I have Jordan Addison. I wanted to get this video out. He is heavily rumored to go to USC coming out of Pitt. He is not yet to USC, but the rumors are heavy. So he could end up not going to USC. That's up in the air. I want to just make that abundantly clear. But Jordan Addison, wherever he goes, could end up being a top pick. Really good player. Was electric last season with Kenny Pickett. He is one of the most highly coveted transfer portal players that is heavily linked to USC. So I've decided to just kind of predict that. That's why we have him there. And yeah, it makes sense for the Patriots, who could really use a big-time playmaker at receiver. So decided to go with him. But let's go back to 14 real quick, having the Raiders taking Bijan Robinson. Oh, man, it's too early for running back. I kind of agree, and this is maybe my Texas bias, right? Bijan Robinson is an incredible player. Also, I'll answer this question because a lot of you guys always ask, why am I a New York Giants fan and a Texas Longhorns fan? That doesn't make any sense. Well, I grew up in New Jersey as a Giants fan, as a Yankees fan, East Coast sports, in that area. And then I had so much family that lived in Texas, still lives in Texas. I live in Texas now. They either went to Texas, were huge Texas fans, so without any real major school or attachment to my family in New Jersey, even like Rutgers, nobody went to Rutgers. So no attachment to anything around there. My parents went to a small-time school, no football team. So I was a Texas fan from pretty early. It was kind of not even a choice, but it's hurt a lot. Did see a national championship when I was a lot younger, but I hope to see one at some point. It's not looking great, but we'll see. I can always hope for the future. But yeah, Bijan's different is kind of what this comes down to. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. He is a really, really talented player. And if there's any running back since Saquon Barkley that could be a first-round pick, and I think is a lot to be a first-round pick, it's Bijan Robinson. And we saw Najee Harris go round 1. Saw Travis Etienne go round 1. Bijan's an incredible running back prospect that offers you a great receiver out of the backfield as well. Tremendous contact balance and ability to fight through contact. He's very, very, very talented. So, yeah, I'm a big Texas fan, but also I think he will end up being a first-round pick. Talked about Jordan Addison. At number 16, Eagles again. Have them going DB, Malachi Moore out of Alabama. This is what I talked about with the positions earlier. Malachi Moore plays in the star role for the Alabama defense. It's like a nickel, kind of hybrid move-around guy. Could be a safety, could be a slot cornerback. Just a pretty good player overall. And for the Eagles that could use a safety, could use a player they can move around their secondary, I think Malachi Moore makes a ton of sense. A lot going on in this page, including offensive lineman Peter Skoronski from Northwestern, going at number 17. Have him listed at offensive line. I think tackle and guard flexibility is kind of what makes him an intriguing prospect. And for the Dolphins that could just use help on the offensive line, why not get Peter Skoronski? Could play tackle, could play guard. We'll have to see how the NFL kind of views him, but we're going to have to see how 2022 works out for that. Number 18 at the Titans going with Kayshon Boutte. Actually, a second time in 2 years now they would take a receiver at 18. Kayshon Boutte, I think, is a really good fit for their offense. Great run after catch ability. He could be the receiver 1 in this class. I just prefer Jackson Smith and Jigba a little bit more to this moment. We'll have to see how Boutte produces in 2022. But great run after catch ability that is highly valuable in the Tennessee Titans offense. So I think Boutte makes a ton of sense. Number 19 out of the Cardinals going Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. Again, we talk about, running back not going round 1, quarterback's not going round 1, and then I have so many, and no tight end round 1. Michael Mayer is a very good tight end prospect. Really good athlete, great size, kind of your do-it-all tight end. I think he will end up being a first-round pick. And to the Cardinals that could use an upgrade at the position, especially with Zach Ertz aging, I think Michael Mayer makes a ton of sense for the Cardinals to keep trying to improve their strength, which is that offense. And then at number 20, back-to-back Notre Dame players, it's Isaiah Foskey, edge, going to the Indianapolis Colts, staying in Indiana. Thought that was a fun little storyline. But also, I think the player's pretty good. He was draft eligible in 2022, so I ended up watching him pretty early in the process, and I was fairly impressed at times, and I think with a good 2022, he could end up being a first-round guy, so I've decided to include him here in this mock draft, and I think it's a really, really talented edge class. You heard me talk about Will McDonald the fourth earlier, as I worked from junior to the second to the third, fourth, even though junior and the second are basically the same thing. Will McDonald the fourth, really talented player among a lot of really talented edge guys that I just could not include in the mock draft because I can't have like 15 edge rushers go off the board even if I want to. At number 21, have the Ravens keeping Dante Demas, local receiver out of Maryland. Big dude. He was super fun, was also draft eligible for 2022, got injured, and ended up, of course, going back to school. But the player's really, really talented, and the Ravens could use an upgrade at the position this time come 2023. We don't know what Tylan Wallace is going to do yet. Don't know how heavily James Prochet is going to impact that offense. But we do know Rashad Bateman's pretty good. I like Devin Duvernay. There's my little Texas bias coming back. But they could end up going with a receiver, especially a big dude like Dante Demas. I think a pretty good fit for their offense. Number 22, have Joey Porter's son, Joey Porter Jr. This one is not an edge rusher. He's a lanky corner with pretty good size overall and has been a pretty good player for Penn State. Wouldn't shock me to see him go in round 1, and they could really use a cornerback next season. Of course, Eli Apple could be gone. I like Chidobe Awuzie. Dax Hill's probably more of a safety. We don't know what we're going to see from Cam Taylor-Britt yet, and they could end up going corner. Could go a number of different positions, but when I was checking out their depth chart and their contracts and all that, a corner kind of stuck out to me as, I think, where they would go in round 1, but it could be offensive line. It could be defensive line. But I think they're pretty fine at a lot of other positions. Could be linebacker as well, really considered linebacker. Just didn't really like anyone's fit as much like Joey Porter Jr., but Trenton Simpson, I guess, could have been a fit. Henry To'oTo'o from Alabama, too. But we'll go to 23 with Kansas State edge rusher Felix Anyadike Uzama. I really like this player. I think he's pretty incredible. Really bendy. Showcases great speed to power at times. I didn't see him in any like top prospect ranking for 2023, but I'm extremely high on the player, and it really would not shock me to see him go round 1 or even higher than this. I think he's got incredible potential, good size, and as like a 3-4 like outside linebacker, as a rush linebacker, we can just say, I think he's going to be a really, really good player. Plays on a 3-man front at Kansas State. That was kind of the thing that stood out to me when I watched him. So he's kind of rotating around from like as far out as a wide 9 to like the 4-eye almost at times. So he's kind of playing all over and wins in a bunch of different ways. Whether it's power to bull rush and go through, whether it's, dipping around the edge. He's really, really bendy, and that's a highly coveted trait of edge rushers. I love Felix Anyadike Uzama. If I had to buy stock in anyone for this next season, it would be in Felix Anyadike Uzama. I think he is pretty incredible. Then we have the Texans picking at 24. I still think safety could be a need for them, even after taking Jalen Petrie. They have Eric Murray back there, but if they're going to keep the Texas A&M guy in Antonio Johnson local, I think you could upgrade at safety, and he's pretty good. We'll have to see how 2022 goes for him, but I think what it comes down to is that the Texans could take any number of positions. I did want to get a safety off the board here. Another guy that I'm extremely high on, I was talking about this edge class, B.J. Ojulari. Yes, brother of Giants edge rusher Azeez Ojulari. I think BJ is a better player overall, and unlike how you'd expect from his first name, doesn't blow. Great player in my opinion, and he's just one of another talented edge rush duo in college. Ali Gay from LSU as well, I think, is also a pretty good player. Very different builds. He's more of a true like strong side defensive end in my opinion, where Ojulari is like a 3-4 outside linebacker. I really, really like the player, and I could definitely see him going a lot higher than 25. So we'll have to see, but have the Chargers taking him here. Number 26, have the Seahawks going receiver Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. DK Metcalf future in Seattle is in jeopardy as I record this. He will play out 2022, it looks like, but might not be back with the Seahawks in 2023. It's something you have to consider. And they could use a third receiver anyway. I like Dwayne or D. Eskridge, but Marvin Mims could be a receiver 1 type guy for them. So I think you have to at least view that as a possibility, but they could go a number of different ways. 27, I have another running back. It's Jahmyr Gibbs. Georgia Tech transfer, will be playing at Alabama. It's not a Jordan Addison situation. He is Alabama, and he's really good. He was really good at Georgia Tech, and I think now playing at Alabama, if he's really good there in 2022, he will end up being a first-round pick, in my opinion. And it's kind of a bit of a vanity pick for the Dolphins, but I think they could use an upgrade at the position, and I did want to include him in my first round. 28, have the Lions taking Trenton Simpson in his Sunday best, looking snazzy with the bow tie. And he was a player for Clemson that really came on strong down the stretch. Really, really good athlete. I have him listed at outside linebacker. He's been an edge at times. He's racked up some sacks. I think he had 6 in 2021. But I like the player. Really solid athlete. And of course, we've seen some great Clemson players come out over the past few years, and this draft class included. This is the second one off the board. We might see another one on the next slide, but Trenton Simpson was kind of like a real spark for that defense at times last year. So I like the player. Wouldn't be shocked to see him go in round 1, even higher than this potentially. Had the Green Bay Packers selecting UNC's Josh Downs. He's a fun little receiver, smaller guy, Was really productive last season for UNC. Could end up being a first-round pick. We'll have to see how 2022 goes without Sam Howell there anymore. Have the Chiefs taking Brian Brzee, defensive lineman from Clemson, going to the Kansas City Chiefs. Big dude, top recruit. Got to see him stay healthy and play out a full 2022. But he definitely could end up being a top pick, probably a lot higher than this as well, depending on how 2022 goes. 31, I just have a clean player that I know is probably going to end up going in rounds 1 to 3. It's Jordan Battle, safety from Alabama. He was draft eligible, watched him for 2022, and I think he was a top 50 player on Daniel Jeremiah's big board. He was just a solid player. So he could end up going round 1. I thought he was worth including just because he is quite good, even if he's not an elite prospect. But we'll have to see how 2022 goes. But Jordan Battle seems pretty safe, and I would bet on him going in. I mean, one of the top few rounds for sure. And then the final pick is the Buffalo Bills, who have the best Super Bowl odds as I record this, taking Notre Dame's Brandon Joseph. Was a Northwestern guy, has transferred to Notre Dame, and with Jordan Poyer's future up in jeopardy, Micah Hyde getting a little bit older, I think safety does make sense for Buffalo, especially when that's so important for their defense. He's a pretty good player, ball hawk, and it'll be interesting to see his transition from Northwestern to Notre Dame. But that is going to do it, guys, for my way too early 2023 NFL mock draft. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know who I should have included that I didn't. Believe me, there were a lot of guys I wanted to include. Like there's a receiver from TCU. Talked about another Maryland receiver. There are a bunch of good edge rushers from Iowa State. There's one who I talked about a little bit, Will McDonald IV. A bunch of guys I wanted to include. Some more running backs. I mean, Tank Bigsby from Auburn. So many guys. Phil Jerkovic, the Boston College quarterback, I think could end up having a good year. Could end up going round 1. There's so many guys, and especially many we haven't even talked about because they're not really on the radar quite yet. But let me know what you think. Who deserves to be a first-round pick? Looking at it a year in advance. Let me know down in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next one. More of what you're used to coming on the channel pretty soon as well. I know some of you have been ruder about it than others, being like, this is boring. Where's video game stuff? It's coming. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.
Back to the house, defensive joke. I'm laughing so loud. Speedbird's good.